Imagine this. A teenager steals a pair of shoes from a department store. He's arrested, charged with theft, and faces a criminal record.
They stole, and they stole, and they stole, and they stole, and they stole. Yeah, how do you like that?
Meanwhile, an employer systematically underpays workers millions of dollars through wage theft, one of the most common forms of theft in the United States. The company might pay a fine, no one goes to prison. Or consider this, a person is arrested for possessing an illegal drug, whereas a company and its owners may aggressively market their highly addictive drug as low risk for addiction, leading to hundreds and thousands of deaths. The company might even make a song pushing its representatives to push more product.
Wow.
In many cases, the consequences are civil penalties rather than criminal prosecution. If criminal law exists to protect society, why are some harmful acts treated as crimes while others are handled with a relative slap on the wrist? Who decides what becomes a crime in the first place? And perhaps the biggest question of all, whose interests are served by the criminal law? In a previous video, we talked about the difference between crime and deviance. Something isn't criminal simply because it's immoral, nor is something moral simply because it's legal. Crime is behavior prohibited by law, which sounds straightforward. However, one must ask, who writes the laws? Laws don't simply appear out of thin air. They're drafted by legislators, signed by governors and presidents, interpreted by judges, enforced by police. Every criminal law represents a series of political decisions made by people, and whenever people make decisions, power matters. The basic ideas around consensus perspective are simple. Societies need rules. Without laws, people could steal, assault, or murder without consequence. Criminal law protects life, property, and public order. Police are supposed to enforce those laws, courts ensure justice is carried out fairly, and the idea is punishment deters future crime. From this perspective, criminal law exists because most members of society have agreed that we need these rules in place. Don't murder, don't rob people, don't assault your neighbor. These laws benefit everyone. And for many crimes, that explanation makes perfect sense. Most people generally support laws against homicide, rape, kidnapping, and child abuse. But not every criminologist believes criminal law develops through broad public agreement. Conflict theory starts from a different assumption. Instead of asking, why do people commit crime? It asks, why were certain behaviors defined as crimes in the first place? Conflict theory has its roots in the work of Karl Marx, who argued that society is characterized by competition between groups with unequal economic and political power. Although Marx wasn't a criminologist, later scholars applied these ideas to criminal law. The argument was simple, but provocative. Those with the greatest wealth, political influence, and social status have the greatest influence over making laws. If that's true, then criminal law may not simply protect society, it may also serve to protect existing systems of power. Think about all the harmful things that happen every day. Pollution, unsafe workplaces. In the following clip, I show former WWE CEO Vince McMahon's response to reporters after wrestler Owen Hart died on May 23, 1999, at the age of 34. The fatal accident occurred during the live pay-per-view WWF event Over the Edge in Kansas City, Missouri. Owen Hart was scheduled to descend from the area's rafters into the ring on a harness to simulate a superhero entrance. Tragically, the release of the mechanism malfunctioned, causing him to plummet nearly 80 feet into the ring. Instead of canceling the remaining of the show, They simply announce his death, and the show continued.
I have the unfortunate responsibility to let everyone know that Owen Hart has died.
Owen was simply to descend into the ring in superhero-like fashion.
Why was he not on a belay line or some other backup line, which is normally used for anybody that's using a rigging? That there would be a safeguard that someone would control.
I'm not an expert on rigging, I guess you are.
Well, it would appear that there were no precautionary measures taken. Why not?
First of all, I resent your tone.
I resent the sarcasm. Again,
No, I resent your tone, lady, okay?
Why
you know, this
there
was a
no
tragic
precautionary
accident.
Wage theft, financial fraud. Some of these behaviors are crimes. Others result in civil lawsuits. Others receive regulatory fines. Some are perfectly legal. Conflict theorists ask an uncomfortable question. Why is one harmful act punished with prison while another receives a financial penalty? The answer, they argue, has less to do with the amount of harm caused than with who commits the harm and whose interests are affected. One thing becomes obvious when you look at the criminal code. A remarkable number of offenses involve protecting property: burglary, theft, shoplifting, motor vehicle theft, trespassing, vandalism, fraud. Historically, as capitalism expanded, governments increasingly emphasized protecting private property and commercial activity. Conflict theorists argue this wasn't an accident. Economic systems depend upon protecting ownership. Without secure property rights and a way to enforce those property rights, markets cannot function. One may argue that protecting property benefits everyone because stable economies depend upon clear rules. Conflict theorists don't necessarily disagree, but rather they ask whether the design of the criminal law is in service of all or an elite few. Edwin Sutherland argued that some of the most harmful crimes occur in corporate boardrooms rather than back alleys. He called these white-collar crimes: corporate fraud, insider trading.
I've decided to go public with Taftco Enterprises.
Good for you! Too bad when you do, the SEC is going to be all up in your ass. When you gave an inside trading tip to my friend Mac, didn't you, Trevor?
What are you talking about?
And by the way, my father's going public with Taftco next week. So buy stock today at 34, not 36.
Price fixing, environmental violations, financial crimes. These offenses can affect thousands, sometimes millions of victims, yet they often receive less public attention than street crime. Conflict theorists argue that the differences reflect power. Street offenders usually possess little political influence or even the ability to obtain legal counsel, whereas legal corporations often possess substantial economic resources, legal teams, and political connections. That doesn't mean corporations never face criminal punishment. Some may, depending on the location.
A Chinese court has handed down a rare death sentence to a former official on corruption charges. State broadcaster CCTV says Yang Yu-lin, a former vice director of an economic zone in the eastern city of Nanjing, was sentenced to death for taking bribes worth more than $325 million between 2013 and 2023. The severe punishment underscores the intensity of President Xi Jinping's anti-graft crackdown.
But conflict theorists may argue that the criminal legal system has devoted far greater attention to crimes commonly committed by the poor than crimes commonly committed by the wealthy. This observation extends beyond white-collar crime. Throughout history, many criminal offenses have disproportionately involved behaviors associated with property: vagrancy, loitering, public intoxication, minor theft, and failure to pay fines. Theorists argue that these laws often regulate the behaviors of marginalized populations while leaving more privileged forms of harmful behavior relatively untouched. Why are certain behaviors associated with poverty more likely to be criminalized than behaviors associated with wealth?
It's because crime doesn't happen because people are bad people. Certainly there are still, of course, going to be perverts, freaks, whatever, but crime, for the most part, is a consequence of your material conditions. That's why when there's more poverty, there's more crime. There's more violent crime. You know, when there's less funding for after-school programs, when there's less funding for education, when there's less funding for any kind of affordable solutions to the housing crisis, all of a sudden you have more people that are desperate.
Conflict theorists also examine the origins of institutions. Take policing in the United States. Northern cities largely developed police departments from English watch systems.
Policing, in one form or another, has existed since colonial days. In the form of night watches, local sheriffs, and militias. But it wasn't until the 19th century that northern cities such as Boston created modern police departments as we would recognize them today. These northern departments were not the first example of a uniformed, publicly funded law enforcement institution in America.
Southern policing followed a different path. Many early law enforcement organizations grew directly from slave patrols, whose purpose was to monitor enslaved people, instill terror, and capture those who escaped. These patrols enforced laws that protected the institution of slavery and the economic interests of slaveholders.
By the time the northern colonies were afoot in the 17th century, the idea of keeping track of the most valuable asset in the United States, that is, enslaved Africans, animated much of what we'd recognize today as law enforcement.
In the 1700s, the South saw the rise of official, salaried slave patrols, whose task was to capture, control, and brutalize enslaved people.
After the Civil War, many Southern police departments evolved from these earlier institutions and enforced Jim Crow laws. Eventually, the laws applied led to a mass incarceration of individuals primarily for low-level offenses.
System of mass incarceration in the United States, a system that has decimated so many of our communities, destroyed so many families, and literally turn back the clock on racial progress in the United States. What makes a community safe is not the number of guns, but the number of good schools, the number of good jobs, the number of educational opportunities, the numbers of opportunities people have for living a decent life.
In this example, policing reflects the priorities of the societies that created it. Police enforce laws, but those laws are themselves products of political choices. So, does criminal law exist only to protect the rich? Not always. Conflict theory is powerful because it asks important questions, but it also has limitations. Many criminal laws clearly protect society as a whole. Nearly everyone benefits from laws against murder, against assault, against sexual violence, kidnapping. However, the enforcement and application of justice may be unequal in those circumstances. Some laws almost certainly reflect the interests of groups with greater economic and political influence.
Welcome back. Former President Trump is looking to the fossil fuel industry to aid his 2024 re-election bid.
So here's what we know. Trump reportedly met with top oil execs at Mar-a-Lago last month, according to Washington Post, saying they should help him raise about $1 billion because they're wealthy enough, first of all. He also said the $1 billion would be a deal for them because they would get taxation and regulation cuts, and they could avoid those thanks to him. He would roll back Biden's clean energy and EV policies.
The next time you hear someone say, it's against the law, ask yourself another question. Who decided that? Who wrote that law? Who benefits from it? And who bears its costs? Crime isn't simply harmful or immoral behavior. Crime is behavior that lawmakers have chosen to prohibit. Sometimes those choices reflect the common good. Sometimes they reflect the desires of politically motivated elites. Conflict theory doesn't ask us to reject the law, it asks us to examine it critically. Because understanding criminal law isn't just about asking who broke the rules, it's also about asking who made the rules and why. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day. If you'd like to support my work, get subscribed, click like, and check out my links below. Have a wonderful day.